when you're ready to start. Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. I have done some version of this presentation several times, and I tried to really cull it down for a short version today. I'm usually pretty long-winded, so I'm going to try to go fast. This work is representative of research and health promotion work I did in a previous role here on campus with the Office of Health Promotion. I'm now at the Center for Health Communication, but there's a lot of overlap in some of the work we did, which were health communication solutions to this public health problem. So I'm going to talk specifically about use of study drugs today. Study drugs is a term I'm going to use to describe prescription stimulants or misuse of prescription stimulants. So no one in this room is surprised that there's a prescription drug epidemic in the US and internationally. When I give this talk to undergrads, I have to really belabor this idea of how prescription medications are something that can improve healthcare and lengthen lifespan, but come with a lot of negatives, frankly. And figuring out that balance is those of us who work in prevention and public health are really responsible for plugging into. This topic is particularly important for the pop-up because most folks who misuse prescription drugs are in this younger age range, young adults 18 to 25. In the last 30 years, overdose from prescription drugs have tripled, and mostly attributable to three types. Opioids, which is far and away at a population level the most commonly abused prescription drug. Depressants, like Valium and barbiturates, and stimulants. And stimulants are what I'm going to talk specifically about today. How did we get here? We have a prescription drug taking culture. There's plenty of supply. There's some stats here. 12 prescriptions per person a year in the US, and that number is pulled up by older Americans who have more prescriptions than maybe a younger, healthier person. But supply is present and demand is present. We are a self-diagnosing and self-medicating culture. Everyone in this room, I feel confident in also saying, has probably Googled a symptom before, right? Everyone consults Dr. Google. And in front of us constantly is advertising from pharmaceuticals. The money behind advertising for some of these big drug companies is unbelievable. And in our culture of Western medicine, we are programmed through our society to want to name something and fix it. And kind of the tolerance for non-specifics or ability to not give something a name that we're feeling is not something we do well in our biomedical society. So particularly, I want to talk about prescription stimulants, recognizing that broadly, opioids across the American population are a bigger issue. But why do we care about it here on our campus? Over the last decade, and a little more than that, 15 years, the incidence of misuse and abuse of prescription stimulants is on a slope that is not stopping. And if we look at statistically, the rate of growth year over year over year is something we should continue to be concerned about. Students, each year, we're seeing increased misuse and abuse of prescription stimulants. We particularly care about this on a college campus because this drug in particular is far and away more likely to be abused by students than non-students, and I'll get into that a little bit. And again, why we care about this specifically, stimulants themselves don't cause as many overdoses or life-threatening side effects as other drugs when abused and misused, but it's kind of this package and this co-occurrence of misuse of a risk profile of a person that we care about. And so binge drinking and marijuana and cocaine use have a high co-occurrence with prescription stimulants. Stimulants, we know them by brand names: Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, Vyvanse, lots of others. They're used to treat ADHD and have a high potential for abuse, and they're one of the fastest growing pharmaceutical categories right now. The side effects that folks who both are using as prescribed and misusing and abusing are pretty significant. I mean, some are uncomfortable and some are bad enough that folks who could benefit from these medications because they have ADHD decide not to use them. Of course, insomnia as one of the main side effects is a desired side effects for folks who are using these drugs as study drugs, because there's the perception that you can stay up longer, study more, concentrate more. So in this age range of 18 to 25, this is students and non-students. About 5% of the population have a prescription stimulant. A lot of them use as directed, and then kind of funneling down, there is misuse that happens into abuse. What we really are concerned about and think about a lot here on a college campus is diversion. This idea that someone has a prescription and they share or sell. In some research that we have done, we know diversion most likely happens among members of the same social group, so people who already know each other. And the pills are usually given away for free and not sold. That's specific to our campus. Why I really like this issue is because it's really complex in a way that I think we can't just determine a black or white solution on this. If we think about using these medicines as study drugs, is it cheating? Are you giving yourself an unfair advantage? Is there an uneven playing field? In our research, students from different colleges have different opinions about that. College of natural science students are more likely to think this creates an uneven playing field. For example, does it alter your brain? We scientists haven't studied prolonged misuse of stimulants and whether your brain is actually changed and whether it has long-term effects on learning. Young adults who come to college are learning how to learn. Your brain is still forming. You're figuring out how to learn, complete tasks. So when you leave college and go out to the workplace, have you changed how your brain works if you've misused stimulants for an extended amount of time? Nobody knows. As far as the research says right now, there is this other side of the field that says this maybe is we should treat this as a technology. Maybe it's a responsible cognitive enhancement. This was written by a tenure-track professor, an article in Nature in 2010, I think. It says, maybe we should consider this as something we can use to help us. Another thing that makes it really complex and that we don't know the answers to right now is the interplay with other addictions. So while prescription stimulants on the list of things that might be harmful in terms of overdose or long-term physical effects might be low, how does this interplay with other substances and addiction disorders long-term for someone? Social norms are particularly important to this health issue. We talk about social norms a lot as it relates to college students and other health behaviors. And I think as it relates to prescription stimulant misuse and abuse, this is a place we really need to work on more addressing. So to illustrate this point, we have a lot of educated folks in this audience, but what percent of UT students do you think, maybe you can't vote because you've seen the data, but what percent of UT students do you think misuse prescription stimulants? Yeah.
Probably above 50%.
Okay, more than half.
Yes.
Anybody else? 75? 75?
I heard a report, students perceive 60%.
Okay.
I'm thinking somewhere around 10 to 15%.
Okay. Well, John is the closest of the actual data, but your answers illustrate a really important point. The norm, the perceived norm of use is far higher than actual use. This 7.2% is from the National College Health Assessment. That's a survey administered every year here on campus by the Office of Health Promotion. This is just the last 2 years. We don't have the 2018 data yet. But we can safely assume this is underreported. But let's say it's twice as high as this. It's probably closer to what John's saying, 15%. If we look at national studies and some of the folks who have looked at this across multiple campuses, it is probably closer to 15 to 20% of students who misuse.
Interestingly, just real quick, the young people and drugs survey that they did came out higher,
Is that
but
right?
that's not
It wasn't
random sample,
Yeah, it was
obviously.
only in above 100 class students in class.
In the young people and drugs class, which may tell you something.
Yeah.
We haven't yet spread it around, but so far that was the data.
Yeah.
John, what were you thinking?
I was going to ask how's the question framed?
In what percent, I have it on.
Because the reason I ask is because if you have students who are legitimately prescribed but also misusing, their
Mm.
perception of their use is also skewed.
Agreed.
Yes,
Right.
very.
And we do know that misuse is really common among folks with prescriptions, even if it's what we wouldn't call like negligent. It's, I take it on the 5 days a week I'm going to class and not on the 2 weekends. Like by definition, that's misuse, but is it harmful, like on the grand scheme of things? Yeah. I think I'm getting the note to move on here. But I do want to point out, if you look at the other classes of pharmaceuticals, stimulants are the highest. You can assume it's at least twice this. Perceptions are far above that, 50, 75%. This is important because perceptions of the world around us, the people around us, the behaviors they're doing, that we see with our eyes or we assume are happening, drive our attitudes about all of those things. And attitudes drive behavior. There are several theoretical underpinnings of this, but to really boil it down and oversimplify is perception of prescription stimulant misuse drives your own behavior. So if students think that lots of other students are doing it, it's going to change their behavioral norm around it, and they might be more likely to engage in that behavior. So here at UT, in addition to the National College Health Assessment, we did some of our own homegrown studies. John, this is the question about perceptions. What percent of students do you think misuse study drugs in the last 12 months? It's kind of a complicated way of looking at the data, but you can see most people think, it's between 30 and 50% of students. If we consider that 7% as reality, you can see it's far below. Even if we take it to 15%, it's still, the behavior is overestimated, and this is really important. I'm going to zoom through some of these results, but I think it's just interesting. Prescription stimulants. Non-users were more likely to say it's cheating to use study drugs, and then more than a third of folks who are using study drugs prefer not to. That's really interesting. And I think speaks to this academic competitiveness that I'm hearing all the time from students, and this idea that they have to do something else to get ahead. And there are gender differences. These are the ones that were significant on reasons for use. This idea of competitiveness, the social norms of friends. This is a small number, but significant as a reason for use for males as an alternative to cocaine. So we think about this public health issue on our campus and some solutions to address it. Now, the best public health solutions are those that are multi-level. So we're thinking about everything from intrapersonal, interpersonal, organization level, all the way up through policy. Health comm solutions are one slice of that. Since that's the world I live in, that's what I want to share with you. This is just a slice of some of the health comm products that we produce to try to change norms around prescription stimulant use. I see some squinting. You're wondering, are they naked? They aren't naked. Everyone here actually has on clothes, and all of these students like raise their hands. Yes, I want to do this. We described it, but the idea here in addressing social norms of UT students study natural. This idea that, and we like intrigued folks by doing the au natural bit with, in the nudity, but this idea, and if we zoom in on this poster, a majority of students don't misuse or abuse. So a really simple, challenging the descriptive norm around how many students misuse or abuse prescription drugs. I will say we had the number 93% in. If you think 7% do, 93% don't. And then through some testing with students, we found the latitude of acceptance for that was not high. So this idea, people didn't believe 93% because of the reasons why I shouted out those numbers, but saying majority made it more acceptable to folks. And then, of course, we have some side effects, which, is kind of iffy on whether listing side effects encourages or discourages use. And then just something else to point out, this idea of protecting your prescription and kind of shifting the norm around assuming that someone's going to misuse or abuse to assuming that someone wants to protect their prescription, that they will use it safely. So that's all I have. I'm sure I went over time, but I would love to continue the conversation and talking about prescription stimulant misuse on college campuses and the importance of shifting norms around those to be able to prevent further misuse of the